Thank you very much, and good afternoon, and welcome everybody. And I love seeing all those smiles on your faces without the masks. That's wonderful. I wanted to tell you a little bit about our local welcome group that the women of the church are doing. We have just distributed $4,400 to various local organizations and the local Lutheran disaster, not the local, but the Lutheran Disaster Fund. And we're very proud that we could do that much money this last year with COVID and all. How we count on the community for support, and we engage in a number of activities. Coming up in May, our next activity will be the 100-mile garage sale, where we have a drive-through bag lunch, which last year they did an excellent job. I happened to be out of town, so I didn't work there. We do a cookie walk / craft sale, which brings in a lot of money for the welcome group. The funeral lunches. Due to COVID, we had to cancel our salad lunches and the soup and salad that we've had in the past years. But we are trying to get engaged with the public more, and today is our first time that we're going to have a speaker, which we are very excited about. I have known Shannon through her family because Chuck and I lived in Owatonna, and her mom and dad, Pat and Shelley McCauley, good Irish people. We did a lot of activities with them through hockey. So you know we were there nights and weekends and got to meet the family and loved being with them. But today I have the pleasure to introduce Shannon and Jason Kerr. And they are going to present their story to us of faith and healing. So please come forward.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for coming. I just first want to thank Faith Lutheran Church for inviting us to come, and the walkout team for inviting my husband and I to come and share our stories. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. A little bit of a background. I grew up in Owatonna. My parents, or Pat and Shelley, they came, and then I'm blessed to have 3 brothers. And out of my 3 brothers, 2 came. My brother Danny, give out a shout out, Danny, wherever you're at. That's my brother. And then Timmy couldn't come, and then Mike John is back there giving me a little shout. So I'm very thankful for that. So the story is, this gentleman right here is from Michigan, born and raised in Michigan, came to college, and that's when I met him. So Jason and I graduated from college, and then we moved to Michigan to start our family. And as you can see in the picture, we're blessed to have 4 kids. My oldest, Trent, you do a little shout out, there's Trent. And then my 2 girls are in the front here, Kyra and Braylon, or Jalen. Braylon, my son, couldn't make it tonight, but blessed to have my 4 kids. So the story ended up starting, it would have been on September 14th, 2015. My girls and I were going to meet a breeder and get a dog. The only reason my oldest daughter, Kyra, was coming is the night before, her and I were making cookies, and she had a glass bowl in her hand on the island. And she jumped down, and as she jumped down with the glass bowl, our dog walked right underneath her, and she fell, and the glass obviously shattered into her hands. She got stitches the night before in her hands, so therefore she wasn't going to school that day. So the girls and I are off to go meet this breeder and look at getting a dog. The boys were going to school, so at 7 a.m. when we left our house. And at 7:28, I was heading through, what was the city? Castle Rock. And I missed the stop sign. So just real quick, out of college, I moved to Michigan, right? And I was a sales rep. I traveled for a living. And that was back in the olden days when you'd open up the map and getting from one city to the next city. Then you go to that city, then you open up the next map, and it would tell me where each doctor was. Remember the olden days, guys? Anyway, so I had never, ever, ever been in an accident, ever, until that one day. Like I said, I missed a stop sign. I was going westbound, and going northbound was a semi-truck. Well, that semi-truck hit my minivan right where my daughter Kyra was sitting. And that semi-truck saw the whites of Kyra's eyes before he hit us. But again, it was my error. There was a gentleman who was behind the semi-truck. He was, name was Mike. He's a registered nurse. He didn't see the accident, but he pulled over to see what he could do to help. So as he got off, came around the semi-truck, then he saw my minivan and thought, there's no way anyone will live through that accident. Got up to my showered windows, looked in the car, and could see the woman driving, didn't have a breath count. Could see the color of her hair, what she was wearing, but she didn't have breath count. So that was she passed. Then saw the second woman, which was me. And I was sitting kind of like in the middle area of this front seat, but my legs were going towards the driver's seat. I had a low breath count, so I was still alive, but a low breath count. And then you saw my youngest, who was behind the driver's seat, Jadalyn, full of blood and crying. And then saw the other daughter, my daughter. She had a low breath count, still alive, but low breath count. Then when all the responders got there, Mike then went to work and told everybody about this accident with these 2 women and 2 kids. Then when the responders got there, they got the jaws of life going pretty quick. And when they got in, they said Kyra's seatbelt was behind her back. Kyra was the one who had the low breath count. Her seatbelt was behind her back. Her head was brought down between her legs. The seat in front of her was reclined over her. So when that semi-truck hit us, a lot of it went over her, keeping her alive. And there was only one woman, me. So let me ask, who was that second woman? And where did she go? God sent an angel. An angel. God was involved in the beginning, and we didn't even know.
That means it's my turn. So I received a call from the state trooper, just letting me, basically wanted to know if that was my daughter's, all that has her identification. I had given them a hug and they left that morning, and so I didn't even know where the hospital was at. Downtown Minneapolis at HCMC, and just started to drive there. I mean, it's never news you'd want to hear. It was the Monday after Labor Day. And as I drove downtown and got to the hospital, I was just, there was a nurse there. She was ghost white, and she pulled me in a room, basically wanted birthdays and middle names. And I was assuming I had a daughter that didn't make it. So it was, I'll probably expand on it more as we move forward, but we've got a video too we'll show shortly that tells a little more of the story, but as I arrived, we had a family that had lost their son, and I started to put myself in that spot. We'll be okay. We didn't practice this part, right? But no, I began to ask people to pray. The video will tell a little better, I promise. But let me see. So Jada was the youngest. She ended up just having minor injuries, like Shannon said. She was covered in blood, and it was blood of her mom and her sister as they just cleaned her off with sterile cloths and realized how bad the situation was. They needed jaws of life, like she had mentioned, to get both of them out. And neither Kyra or Shannon were supposed to make it.
Jadalyn, my daughter, she was in shock. Like, just shocked. She was awake. Kerr and I were in a coma. She was awake and she was just in shock.
But I just remember people started to come, friends of ours, and wondering what happened, even family, and it was like, just pray. Because there's nothing that we could physically do to help the scenario. It didn't really matter time frame and to where you were at and what you were doing. And all the details, like they were fighting for their life, and I just wanted people to pray. Kyra had cracked skull, lots of broken bones. Yeah, that picture was hard as we were kind of going through this, because they had to comb her hair. She hated her hair combed, especially by me. She said that.
And still does.
The point is, it was just matted with debris in it. And so as she was in a comb in this picture, they began to comb it like a day or two in and just kind of get her cleaned up. But it was tough to watch. And she had a tear of blood from the stitches that would continue to come down the day. I'm not sure if they ended up putting another stitch in or what, but it was just a horrific situation that we were dealt. It felt like at the hospital, like everybody knew, like, that's the guy whose wife and kids are here. And at any moment, it felt like they could come and say, hey, so-and-so didn't make it. But early on, they wanted me to sign off to remove part of her skull. And I had no history with medical to even comprehend that somebody could function after that was your only option. And so I remember looking at her dad, and like, this is my only option. So signing off that they could remove, half of her skull to reduce the swelling, I signed off on, just thinking, like, I had never, like, that's the only option they're giving me, but I had never seen or heard of somebody functioning after this. That's the case scenario they're giving me at the time. So she was in that hospital for, I'm going to be jumping ahead here, by that Friday. So she's got in on Monday, it's Friday, it's 5 days later. I woke up because we were sleeping in a room. We just stayed night after night there. Just didn't seem to matter what day it was. She actually started to get worse 4 or 5 days in. I woke up and I just had like a lump in my throat, like something I'd never felt before, honestly. And I thought, well, I can't be breathing over my daughter and my wife that are trying to just survive. And so my mother-in-law suggested go down to the clinic, so we went downstairs, and my father-in-law demanded them to give me a shot. That was his idea. I'm like, I don't need a shot.
My husband's not like shots.
Yeah, whatever. And so I forget what even they said. The point was that I think that whole thing was just to get us on that elevator. Because when a year prior to this accident, we had went on a missions team to Swaziland, Africa, and helped with orphans and just kind of was in the community to see what that level of poverty and just life looked like, and just be able to help feed my starving children here. We unpacked the boxes there, and we're feeding these kids that, like, they get a meal of chicken once for the year. Like, that's a special meal for them. So a year later, we're in the elevator, coming up from, checking that clinic, and there was an African man in there. I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention because I knew my scenario was rough, but I remember my father-in-law saying something about the weather, and we had to go to the 7th floor. And you were starting to notice some of the same people that were there day after day on that. That was the top trauma floor. And as we came up the elevator, just some small talk, and my father said, yeah, my daughter and his wife is here in critical condition, just not doing well at all. And so as soon as we stepped off, he was actually pushing who I think was his mother, and she was in like a full African outfit, top hat, just dressed head to toe, with just kind of African garment, and he pushed her out of the elevator and then turned and said, can you pray for us? And we, absolutely, you can pray, but we're standing right in a bank of 4 or 5 elevators, and it was just kind of cross-section for all the activity on this hospital, but we stood right there. He began to just boldly pray and proclaim just don't believe what they tell you. He pointed right towards where her room was at. And like I said, it's the first time we had seen this guy. And he just boldly prayed. And it just brought kind of our faith and our confidence up for Pat and I both. Like, man, we haven't heard somebody kind of pray like this. And just, I remember turning and thinking, well, let me pray for you. And I returned the question, like, what can I pray for? He's got his mom, he's at the hospital, like something obviously. And I just remember this man chuckling. Like, it just struck me as odd, like, why wouldn't he want me to pray? And as we walked in, there was a walk around the corner and into the pediatric area where my two girls were still at. We just had smiles on our face, I guess, and my mother-in-law just recognized that, and like, what did you guys just see? You know, she just came up from downstairs, and we're getting no good news. I mean, all of it was pretty rough at that point. And just to have that man pray, and it just hit me like, that had to be a divine appointment, that this man was there to pray, and then chuckled when I asked. So I just feel like the Lord put like an angel there to give us that confidence to hold on, because later that day is when they came in, a team of neurosurgeons, like they had specialists after specialists that came in all week, and they finally got to a point where basically they didn't want, I don't know if you can see where her trach is. I signed off on the trach on Thursday. It was just kind of a half-hearted effort with a paper, like, hey, if you want to do this, this is next. But they were already giving up hope into just her able to be able to function. I mean, she was on machines and things at that point, and I signed that. And then Friday, after having this, the team came in later that night to my father-in-law, a youth pastor friend of ours, and a lady girl that broke the Caring Bridge, and just basically said, hey, it's the end of the road. You know, like, you guys need to pull the plug. Otherwise, and they went into some detail as to what life would look like if you don't make the decision. And so I was actually at a worship night that night. You'll get to see some of that in the video. We went through our church to that, and am I jumping around too much?
I love this man. What are you rolling to bring?
And so, as I got back, I know my father-in-law and Ben Markham, pastor friend, they both were trying to just let me know what had happened. I mean, neurosurgeons came. That was the first time I had actually physically left the hospital for that worship night in a week. And they came in and tried to tell me, and I just denied it. Like, that's not what we're going to choose to do. You know, I remember telling them to go home and get some sleep because it just was heavy in that environment.
They said unplug me, which meant death, or can't be plugged in and be a vegetable the rest of my life.
And one thing too is she tells you guys this stuff. She has memorized it from us telling her.
I've been taught the information. I was in a coma. I was really tired.
So one of the positive points is when Kyra started to come around. I would actually play a song, Oceans. If you heard the song Oceans by Hillsong, you probably recognize it. Would be, I think, on video or something. But Kyra, I played it for Kyra in the morning. Like, she was still in her coma, but I just play it for her. And there were my parents who came in from Michigan, and the family members were there. Somebody was always in Kyra's both rooms, kind of around the clock, just somebody there. And as Kyra started to kind of come out of her coma, she had saw my dad and just said his name, which prior to that, they had told us she'll never do this, she won't be able to do that because of the cracked skull, because of the brain injury, because of all things. And so for her to, with lots of people praying, come out of that coma and right away recognize, you know, like, hey, Grandpa, why are you here? Type thing was just an answer to all of our prayers at that point, to just kind of continue to give us hope to believe that Shannon would continue to fight through. So when they were going to make the transition from HCMC, so the first week they gave her full care. This is just looking back on it, nothing against any health professionals. We were just in the top trauma. So any motorcycle accident, any major anything that happens, like in the metro area for sure, they all go there. So you're constantly having people come and go, but you could just tell, like, they didn't have a whole lot more they could do for my bride after that first week. And so we had to transition into kind of a long-term care because I had chosen to not pull the plug and to keep her going. Well, that second week, they moved us into a room. We were just kind of on the floor, but kind of out of the main attention. A lady would come in and just move her joints around. Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of anything they could really do to her. So in that week, they were going to move her out of HCMC and put her in just a long-term care facility that was just a lot of just brain injured people. It was a locked floor, heavy, and some of the people had been there for years and years, varied in ages, and not many of them could even hold a sentence. So with that, I just presented it to the doctors, like, I can't have my daughter here and be going to St. Paul. We chose a place in St. Paul. So we fast-tracked for Kerr to be able to get out of the hospital, and she was able to come home after 2 weeks, and then I took Kerr home and then drove back to Bethesda to get Shannon situated. Obviously at this point she has no clue as to what's going on, just came out of intensive care and did just more of a long-term care. There was a lot of people, though, through my kids and through other churches we had been at, as far as from moving. I had served on some missions teams and helped lead. So I just had people all around that started to hear the news. And just with that Kerry Bridge as a piece, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, I didn't know it until that day. It was a piece where just one update could go out to give everybody the correct information. And it was just a platform where people could begin to pray specifically for whatever we were going through at that time. At beginning at almost an hourly or bi-hourly basis, and then it moved into daily or as it progressed, it just gave kind of specifics for people to pray. So in that, I wanted, like, my kids were at a Christian school up by Farmington, and there's lots of people through church and just friends and family and cousins that were all asking, and I wanted their children to pray. Like that stuck out, because I wanted that childlike faith to pray for healing. I just felt in the moments that as we get in age, we've got stories and we see people that didn't make it, there's things that didn't happen, where those children, they know the Lord can do anything. And so I just continue to try to ask that to be part of what can we do. I wanted everyone to pray, but for sure the children. So we still run into people, like randomly at a park or something, that'll come up and hug her because that family prayed, because they were friends of friends of whoever that word got out. And so I'm just can't thank people enough for being obedient to cry out to our Savior. On behalf of this woman, where's my transition? So, she ended up at Bethesda for 11 weeks. HCMC 2 weeks, Bethesda 11 weeks. Fast-tracking the story some, but there was just a lot of therapy through there. And it's kind of like watching your child grow up. Like, you just don't necessarily see the improvement every day when you're there day after day. But as people would come and maybe not be there for a week or two, they would say, hey, she's not moving her hand, or she's, like, seeing improvement, but it was minor increments. It was almost like as she started to progress and get better, it was like a sleepwalking. Like, she would even start to respond to people, but no memory of it. But I know one thing, I had a work text that I would help tie her shoes. She'd take a nap, she'd lay down, I'd tie her shoes, and I'd get her in the wheelchair to go to her therapy. And I remember setting my phone down, and I remember her picking it up and like swiping at it, which just stuck out. Like, there's way more that she's able to do, because even as I got to Bethesda, I had another doctor, after all the other doctors, pulled me in a room with my father-in-law, bring up something from Wikipedia and basically say, your wife will never do, and just beat me down. Like, I remember my stomach just turning, but for this lady just to be bold and to tell me what will never happen was another kind of down point. But as the story progressed and she got better, I remember that doctor specifically, because I avoided that one. Not trying to be rude, I just didn't need that. And even to backtrack some, at the first hospital, as I get specialist after specialist come into the room and want to tell me all the details, like I would try to shut them down. Like I didn't need to hear all of it. Like I can tell it's really bad. I don't need to know all the names and all the stuff and all the specifics of it. Like I didn't need to get caught up in it all. So I would try to just end that conversation and just ask if they believe in Jesus to pray. That was just one thing that I did in the moment. Like I don't need to hear more and more about how bad all of this is. Like I can totally see where this is really bad. So that, fast forward to that lady that said she will never do all these things, and trying to just teach, because some of the doctors wanted to go to my parents and to other family members and say, hey, you need to talk to him because we think he's not quite comprehending what we're saying. You know, like he's not understanding how bad this actually is. But I was fully aware of what it was. I just knew I had 4 kids and I needed her to help raise these kids. And that was my heart's cry, and that's where I am so thankful for everyone that decided to reach out and pray.
So going back to that second hospital, Bethesda, I wasn't, like Jay said, I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't walk. I don't know if you've ever heard of a tube feed. A tube feed is where they have liquid food and they put it in a cup. And the cup has a tube that goes down to my tummy. And that's how I eat a meal. I didn't eat food. And talking, like you hear me talking now, I couldn't talk. I mean, it was really quiet, and if I would try to talk, it made no sense. And my memory, like he said, it was just deleted. It was deleted. I remember being in that wheelchair, and I remember going and saying, oh, see that elevator? I think about the elevator. I can sneak out of that elevator, and I can go home. But they locked it down. I needed a passcode. I didn't know the passcode, but I didn't know how to go home. I didn't know where home was. Then I remember on the wheelchair going towards a window thinking, if I break that window, I can climb down and then I can go home. Where's home? And then I remember that wheelchair coming up to this map that was like the picture of the world. And I remember looking at that map going, I wonder where home is. But I do remember now looking at Swaziland in South Africa, where Jay and I had done a mission trip a year ago. And I remember thinking, maybe that's home. Maybe that's home. So I was just a mess. And then Thanksgiving-ish, just a week later.
And she says she couldn't remember. I remind her every day that she loves me. I forget, no one has problems. But Thanksgiving, the night before Thanksgiving, is when she got transferred from Bethesda, the long-term care, into Courage County. So she was improving enough, doing the therapies to try to get her out of long-term care, which they were looking at as a very positive sign. Still had a long ways to go, but at least didn't have to be hospitalized. So it was like a 2-week kind of boot camp, essentially, to get you from long-term care into home. So that was a Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I drove her over there. She didn't have to take the hospital to that one. I took her, and she was whispering to me the whole time, like as I'm driving 94, and she hadn't been in a car since the accident, so I wasn't sure how all of it would happen, and drove her to Minneapolis, to Courage County. And so that night she stayed there. She wasn't happy because she thought she was heading home. I
wanted to go home, but I didn't really know where home still was.
So then we spent Thanksgiving in the hospital, and with nobody there. It was just kind of us, kind of checking it out. But it was still good news. There was still some movement forward, but we still had a long journey of healing to happen.
Hebrews 4:13 says, I can do everything through him who gives me strength. See, they were teaching me how to walk. You think walking is easy. Well, it's not. It's difficult. They're helping me with my memory. They're showing me flashcards, and I'd have to call it what the flashcard was, and I remember thinking, I know what that is, but I couldn't think of the word. So like spoon, blackbird, just easy stuff. Well, it's not easy when you're trying to remember. Oh yes, and the 2 feet. I was on that 2 feet, remember that cup with the liquid food? Yeah, relearning how to eat food is really hard. I mean, think about those little peanuts. You gotta give them some graze. I mean, it is tough. So relearning to eat as an adult is a 4-step process. And the first step is applesauce. Well, that should be easy. So what they do is they teach you applesauce for month-ish, and then you take a test. And the test says when you swallow, does it go down the right tube or does it go down the wrong tube? So I take my first test, and I failed. Relearn applesauce for month-ish again. Test number 2, I failed. Relearn applesauce again for another month-ish. Test number 3, I pass. Okay, so step 1, 2, 3, 4. The last step in relearning to eat. Give me an idea what you think that might be. The last step. I'm sorry, what? I heard somebody.
Meat.
Meat. You'd think so. You'd hope so. I'd hope for some steak, you know, seriously. Yeah, it's water. Clean water. And hey, guess what? Water is actually difficult. So I take my last step and I pass. Bring on the coffee, bring on the chocolate, I can eat food. Oh, hey, we have a video that we would like to show. Our church meetings, River Valley, it's called, it's on YouTube, it's called My Faith Will Stand, Shannon Kerr. And real quick, as we watch that video, that doctor you see on there was one of those neurosurgeons at the first hospital who was really in my husband's face. She's a great doctor about unplugging me. After this whole process, I'm home. I asked for her because she's an excellent, brilliant doctor. But here's the video.
Oh, yeah, one more thing. As she said that therapy, there was one process that they wanted her to be able to look like in a phone book and fix something at home. It's part of occupational therapy. And they said, look up like DirecTV and figure out how to call somebody to fix something at your house. And she said, well, my husband would do it. and the guy,
Well, he does.
They had to go through about 3 times because she kept telling him my husband will do it. And he's thinking that she can't physically do it. I'm like, no, I can do it, but my husband would do it.
Hey, the reality. It's so hard to watch that video. I still get a little emotional. I think that's smoking out for a thought. I didn't know I was supposed to not do that because I did it.
One scripture is Mark 10:27. Jesus looked at them and said, with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. I just, video's hard to watch for me too, but at the end of the day, like, the Lord answered our prayer, and we cried out to Him, and I just encourage each one of you, like, He is real, and He loves each one of you. And I know there's difficult circumstances and situations that we're all going to face, have already faced. Maybe made wrong decisions, for sure. I've made wrong decisions. My kids will tell you that. My wife will tell you that. But I just want to encourage each one of you to, like, I try to wake up and spend the first part of my day with our Savior. I know that when the accident first happened, I just turned, like I had nothing to say to the people that were coming. Like, thank you for the support. There was nothing physically to say. I just remember turning and, like, falling to my knees and going against the window just to pray, just to talk to Jesus, because there was no specialist, there was no doctor, there was no anything that was going to change the scenario other than a holy Savior.
All of us, we all deal with different challenges in our life. We all do. All of us, every single one of us. But believe me, in the junk of the challenges, there is positives. There is positives. How I view it, like, let me give you a couple examples for me. When I walk, even as I'm standing here, I deal with dizziness. I'm always dizzy. Balance, I stink at balance. Like, it's a struggle for me. And I walk kind of funny. But that's okay. Positive, I'm not in a wheelchair. I can walk. Eating. Remember the eating process? Last thing being water? Okay, water, eating food for me is challenging. I eat funny, I eat slow, and when I swallow, like I can turn to the side like this, and that's how I swallow. But at least I'm on the tube feed. I can eat food. I don't have a tube feed anymore. So in the junk or in the challenges, there is positives. And the memory, remember how I used to have those memories where they give me flashcards. I can say something, like literally I'll say like a sentence now, and then 2 sentences later, I forget a word. It's like, oh, what was that word again? What was that thought? Well, who cares? And I've had 8 seizures. Seizures stink. They stink bad. I mean, my history was I used to be a sales rep. The sales rep, I had the state of Michigan, the whole state. Now I don't drive. And for an independent woman, that's tough. But guess what? I'm not in a wheelchair. I get to be a mom. I get to be a wife. I get to enjoy my extended family, my parents, my brothers. I get to stand here and talk to you about angels. They're real, and they're out there, and they're with us, and we don't even know it and see it. But the Lord let us know of that 1, 2, possibly 3 angels. And let me share about that. I get to share about that. I get to share that healings still happen. Miracles still happen. So yes, there's stuff I can just focus on all these negative things that was taken away from me. Or I can choose to see the positives. So join me. I know all of us deal with challenges. We all do. But find the positives. They are there. Please trust me, they're there.
I just wanted to say, it's a free gift of salvation is what I had to make to have a relationship with Jesus, just to ask Him into my heart and to believe and trust in Him when nothing else, no one on earth could change the scenario. Like He's my Heavenly Father. And so making that decision is the best decision I've ever made. And that's what I hope my kids and to pass it on to anyone that hears the story, because all outcomes don't come out as positive as this, and we're well aware of that. But having that hope in a Heavenly Father, knowing that this world isn't our home, and storing my treasure in heaven is what I want to encourage each one of you guys to do. So we're thankful for the opportunity to share this story with you. And I think we're open to questions too if I missed something along the way and you guys wanted any more clarification.
Before we get to the question and answer, I'd just like to thank you so much.
There's no bad questions, honestly. Got a thought, a question? I'm sorry.
You guys are obviously a family that were good faith before this accident, correct? Just wanted to confirm that.
I mean, yes, I was saved, but I would question angels. I think, are they real? Are they really there? I question it. I don't question them. I know they're there. A lot of times they're hidden, and we aren't even aware of it. Good question. Thank you.
There was a story that when we went back to the hospital for the checkup, the neurosurgeon, there was a desk of the neurosurgeon, and they all stood up and came over to her. So they recognized me, but she looked a lot different than when they had saw her.
My hair was not shaved anymore. Well, it was still shaved, but it was growing.
The point is, they just stood up and said, you had to have an angel. Like, you had to have an angel. One of the guys that came in the room was a scribe. He was actually a physician that had lots of conversations with me.
He was saying the neurosurgeons, the hospital we visited, there's neurosurgeons.
And so, just in his interaction with me and my belief that she was going to be healed, when you look at her physically, like, it was physically hopeless. But this scribe, this is as we came back in, it was 9 months, a year later, he came in, took the notes, which I didn't realize how it all worked. He wasn't supposed to be in the room, so he took the scribe's spot, came in as a physician just to take notes, and then followed us into the waiting room and sat next to us in the waiting room and said, "You remember who I am?" And
I'm introducing myself, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah, she doesn't remember any of the stuff before. That's why I remind her she's still married to me. She loves it. But he's in tears in the waiting room, just saying, you don't realize how we treat all patients different now because of just the faith, the family support that you had, that all the science and the learning that we have, like, doesn't scratch what's out there. Like, to hear a physician that looked at me as crazy on this side to say, hey, we now look at things differently because of this scenario. We just want the Lord to get the glory on all of that, but the brain is so intricate, and doctors are wise, but not near what our Heavenly Father has to be able to help and to be able to heal. So I guess that was part of me through this process, is I didn't have that medical any background, and I didn't go into that part of it. I just knew a Heavenly Father that had raised people from the grave. And that was my heart's cry.
I had the opportunity to read your book, Shannon, and I was very impressed with it. But I want to know what made your mother decide to keep a diary at this stage of the accident. How would you think about doing that?
From my understanding, Mom, I don't know if you want to say that, but my understanding is it was on her heart after a couple days to do it. Mom, is that correct?
Well, I feel like it was day 2, yes, and it was totally the Lord, because I was in this family room that there was, and I just felt like the Lord put on my heart that to journal, and in the midst of that, I was, believing she was going to be okay. I was kind of like, Jay, I'm not listening to what all you people are saying, because, literally the doctors would walk in and be like behind me saying, I don't want to hear what you're saying, but I just felt like he said to me, journal, so she'll know her story. And so I would journal every day, thinking I was doing it for her, and I slept with Jada every night. I lived there for 9 months, and some nights I'd be undercover with my phone, just writing in there so I could journal it. I was totally in whoever thought that was the Lord's plan, to give people who are in this horrific situation maybe some hope, and because everybody needs hope. So that was kind of the deal. So it was the Lord's plan, not mine.
There's also visions of people coming to the family and saying, us, and saying, like, Shannon's going to be preaching, like she'll be talking in front of people.
Yeah.
And so
That was in the first week.
yeah,
There was 3 different ladies in 3 different states.
right away. Yep.
The exact same vision.
And the vision has been completed. It's about for the 15th time.
Jay and I have spoken in 5 different states. We love sharing the story. We never say no.
On that also, talking about how to journal in those moments, some of the pictures you saw too, like I remember friends of hers pulling a phone out and taking a picture in the hospital when this is the first couple days, first couple hours, like, why in the world are you taking a picture? But to have those now, I'm thankful for, but in the moment, like, that's the last thing I would have thought of, is to take a picture.
Can you tell a little bit more about the EMTs, what they thought when they didn't find a 4th adult or a 2nd adult woman?
So Brian, the guy that shared in that video, I had spoke with him a lot. He was the head firefighter out of most all of the EMTs came from Northfield, which the accident happened just north of there. But just the alignment of where everybody was, to be on site and the timing and the jaws of life to be able to respond was very quick as far as what normally would happen on a situation like that. They just were able to respond very quickly. 2 helicopters came. I know they're going to send one of the helicopters back to Mayo, and one of the ladies right before it lifted off said, no, send them both. Because it came from Mayo, one came from HCMC, but they sent them both to have mom and daughter at the same place. So I know that was some back information. But as far as the angel that was there, only the very first car, because I started hearing stories of them in the hospital, being from, she had friends in Northfield, and there was a lot of connection there. That stories started to come out as to who was around, who, was close to the accident and stopped by it and knew a family member that was there as far as responders went. so finally I got contact with the first guy, his name was Mike. So the accident was pushed off into the parking lot, and he just saw debris in the road, and there was a car in front of him who I never spoke with who that car was. They pulled off to one side, and Mike was thinking they're just pulling off to clean this stuff out the road. And as he approached, he saw the accident too. So he pulled over, was a registered nurse, and he just went up to start to evaluate. I mean, needed jaws of life to help anyone, and just started kind of checking out who's who, breath counts, that kind of thing, just as a bystander, essentially. And so he's the one that gave the full description of this other woman. Hair color, breath count, approximate age, hair length, and he gave a full description. I still have my audio that I recorded with him 3 or 4 days after the accident of what his take was. But as news started to come out, mom with 2 girls, he just thought, well, this other has deceased, and they need to let next to kin know. So that was kind of his take on it until all of a sudden nobody was ever talking about somebody else in the car. But in the moments that were described to me of the semi seeing the whites in Kyra's eyes, like just the impact, I'm like, there's no way my daughter's alive. So to have that guardian angel there before anyone even knew to pray, we believe, like, put her head down, like she mentioned, at her feet, and that chair and the seatbelt behind her, like there's no way, because neither vehicle had slowed down after they did the reports. So this guy's traveling about 60 miles an hour. There's actually a beer truck full of product heading north. He had another guy with him. Maybe he was distracted talking there, I don't know, but full impact right in the side door where she would have been sitting, like, should have never had a chance to dock or move if he saw her eyes. So we just believe, like, the Lord had a protecting hand over the situation before we ever knew it. So that he was the only one to report. I ended up talking to another guy that actually crawled in the vehicle trying to help with things, but no one else gave that description of somebody else in the car.
We spoke in a place in Northfield, and that gentleman, Mike, I didn't know he was coming, but he came and was like sitting out there with you, and we did a question and answer at the end. He literally stood up, got on the microphone, out there in the question and answer, and just like explained, no, I saw one. I mean, it was very moving, very moving.
Yeah, you couldn't convince him different. He's probably 60 years old, owns a cabinet shop now, like I say, was a registered nurse, and very credible. He even came to do the video, but it just got too long as far as what and too many parts of the story to try to condense down to that, but yeah.
Another question? Comment?
Yeah, you, after a year after the accident, you had a gentleman call you from the ATM or whatever they call it, you know, whatever, and give you a testimony of how his life changed. You just share that.
Yeah, it was actually one of the guys on the video, and he was struggling with his marriage, and a lot of those first responders, as far as EMTs, all had young kids. So as far as the relatability of seeing a mom in a van with kids, I know it was heavy on them. Like, a lot of them came to visit days after, and just it really stuck. Even some of the surgeons had young kids, and just really, I don't know, I just know the Lord used the situation immensely in that way. But this man showed up, struggling marriage, struggling with work, I think alcoholic, and it sent something about a year later around Christmas time, just seeing the impact of our conversations and just watching the story and just knowing the Lord had a hand, him being a part of it. He was the one that actually got Kyra out of the car. Just how it turned his life around from where it was headed to be in that moment and to see what had happened. So it just another testimony from just a horrific situation. Very thankful for all those responders that are willing to go and help on that. Even the helicopter guys, I think, came back. There was quite a few. I mean, I had quite a few people come that were just involved and part of it.
You have a question back there?
Yes. First of all, I know faith and then family. What else was good support for your children during this?
Like I had mentioned, it didn't seem to matter what day of the week it was. You know, like if it was the weekend or Monday, I would just go to the hospital with her each day. So kind of like Groundhog, and I had some people, family friends, come to our house. One's a youth pastor, and we're staying at our house. And it was interesting as day 2, 3, 4 came, and I would come back home and just see how people's lives would kind of start to continue. They're checking with their family, maybe the TV's on, just, not they didn't care about my situation, but it was just hard to know I've got family members there. Like, my life has changed a ton, and I'm still not out, like, I don't know what's going to happen for sure, and to see how people would just, like, that was 2 days ago's news, or whatever, you know what I mean? Not to belittle it, but just was the situation coming to my home. But my mother-in-law did come in and basically helped take care of my girls, and my parents would come in at times. So we had lots of support there, even some friends through, when the boys played basketball, like they were helping with the kids. There'd be people show up with groceries and meals just to help that way. I mean, even Christmas, I remember somebody brought gifts and just dumped them at the door, and they were driving out the driveway. So there's people just willing to help all around with whatever they could, and that's where, like on that Caring Bridge, I don't know, it went to like 100,000 and 200,000. Like, there was people that just, the story just spread, and so I know there was thousands of people that were beginning to pray and just support from all around, even whatever, never knowing us, you know. So I'm just thankful for that community of like passing along. I had a friend, I do Jimmy John's, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but friend from there, we were supposed to meet with that Wednesday. I had to call off the meeting with him. He owned some stores in St. Paul. He was he moved to Wyoming. He shows up in Wyoming. This is during the accident, so I had to let him know, hey, my wife's in an accident. He began to pray too. He's visiting a church in Wyoming, and this is within the first 2 weeks. All of a sudden, they say, we're going to pray for Shannon Kerr at this church. Like, he's visiting a church in Wyoming, doesn't know anybody there. Like, how in the world? Well, come to find out, it was somebody from the church we had went to in Michigan and helped serve in youth. They had moved there, his wife worked at a hospital, and they ended up, whatever city it was in Wyoming, and that congregation just was obedient to pray. So that's, I don't know if that answers the support question, but I had lots of it. But it did seem to dwindle as time would go on, because lives go on. So as she's there for weeks and now months, and I'm on a long-term care floor with 4 kids at home and a wife that has no idea I exist, you know, with people just moaning and making noises, and it's just heavy and hard. So it was Sundays was the day that people would come, or Sunday afternoon families and stuff would show up to come see her and see how she's doing. And so that was a very tiring day as she started to progress and get in a wheelchair and be able to kind of sit up, but it would wear her out. But then as she started to talk, some of the stuff she would say might not be necessarily appropriate for kids.
I didn't know.
Yeah, I've got families coming that have prayed, and they're waiting to see what Miss Shannon has to say. And so, tell her it's time for a nap, you know. Interesting.
Funny story about that too, to add on to that. When me and my wife went in there to see Shannon, she said, you guys ain't gonna have a kid. And we had 4 at the time, so not Shannon. But Tim went in there, and she talked to him and thought she had another child. There was a child like that. Yeah, just came out of coma, got someone to have that baby. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions?
Yeah, how long after the accident did you recognize your husband?
I think that was very slow. I came out of my coma around 11-ish weeks, and then I just remember looking at him thinking, I know him.
Last week.
I just remember looking at him, and I remember not really knowing, and then it just slowly kept coming. I mean, the healing process is still going, literally. I just get better at walking, better at eating, better at memory, better at just stuff. So it's not like, oh, this great healing, just big healing. Hey, Lord's time is perfect, not mine. So it's a slow healing process, and that's okay.
I can say that, so the accident happened the Monday after Labor Day. Around Halloween, they decided to put her skull back on. The swelling had reduced enough, and we were told, like, hypothetically it could, like there's no for sure, but once the skull goes back on, it's protecting your brain, like you'll just function better. And so it seemed like after that went on, there was a lot more improvement, you know, just having that piece connected. And so I think at that point is when she started to actually respond more and things. But there was points to that where people would come. I remember one man from my in-laws' church and another good friend of mine that I'm in a men's group with, both were there, all three were there. And one of them started to rub her foot, and which was fine. I just knew in that moment, like, she has no idea who her husband is. Like, you know, so even our anniversary passed middle of October, and I remember saying something to my in-laws on that. It was reality, it's just where we were at. Like, she had no idea who I was, so it was kind of the same gradual piece, but I think a trust maybe was built even without her knowing from seeing me there each day and just helping with things, so I'm sure that was part that she probably can't verbalize and really remember, but just the fact that, oh, this guy always helps with my stuff, just like if it was a therapist that was nice and helping, like I was just that guy until last week.
Do you feel that God has an angel watching each of us? And I mean, with your experience, you think that God has an angel watching each of us?
Yes.
Okay.
I think there's even more than that. I think we go to the grocery store, it's probably an angel. We don't even know it's an angel. Or we go for walks, somebody walks by and hey, could be an angel. 100% could be an angel. Doesn't matter what we do, they're there. And they look like us, which is crazy. Like, how can an angel just be else than us? I don't know. The Lord knows. Yeah, before the accident, I don't think probably I should. I always believed in angels, but I question it. I can't question anymore. I just can't.
How long were you on tube feeds?
Oh, that was I felt like a long time. I came home from the hospital. I couldn't eat food. At home, I was having liquid food. I remember that because I could not stand that sucker.
End of March.
End of March.
End of March.
Yeah, you saw that.
So it would have been 6 or 7 months.
Yeah.
I wanted food.
But they couldn't take that out until, because she had some, one of the vocal cords doesn't work, was paralyzed, and that was part of the therapy. But like she said, the clear liquids, like it would, when she'd swallow, it would just go into her lungs, you know, and then that aspirated, right? So that was what they had to make sure she could do before removing the tube feeds. So she had to be able to pass that. So there was lots of tests, and this was outpatient at that point. We'd go back in for different therapies, and she'd have different tests to finally be able to know she could swallow without.
Well, see, this side of my throat does not work. This side compensates for this side. Hey, at least I can eat food. That's all I think for. If I don't need all of it to work, just let me eat.
Just eat slow.
Very slow.
So Jason, you own some Jimmy John's restaurants, right?
That's what I do, correct?
Yeah. Do you have a sandwich named after your wife now?
Good question. I like that one.
No sandwich.
Pastor, is that called planting the seed?
Yeah.
So somebody way smarter than me, I can't remember who, said that spiritual growth comes from either great suffering or great love. And you have shared both with us here today. And so thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah. Thank you guys.